The door slammed shut behind me, and I froze. I hadn't expected this. Her. The woman standing in front of me could have been my reflection in a mirror, except for the tears running down her face and the terror in her eyes. It took me a moment to recognize my own twin, Isabella. But it was her. It was unmistakable. I couldn't breathe. Isabella. My voice came out hoarse, too thick with fear to sound right. She didn't respond, just clutched the manila envelope in her shaking hands, like it was the only thing holding her together. I watched as she took a hesitant step forward, eyes flicking over to the door like she was expecting someone to follow her. Then, the silence hung heavy, thick with the unspoken question. What the hell is she doing here? She wasn't supposed to be here. Isabella was supposed to be in France, far away, where no one could hurt her. She was supposed to be safe with Lorenzo. I had arranged everything, signed those papers 6 months ago to make sure she stayed out of the line of fire. I thought I had saved her from this world, our world. But here she was, trembling on my doorstep at 10 o'clock at night, looking like she'd just walked through hell. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my pulse, but it wasn't working. The truth was, we were both in danger. If anyone found us together, both our lives would end before the night was over. I stepped forward quickly, grabbing her wrist before she could take another step. I felt the smoothness of her skin, the absence of the birthmark I had carried all my life, the one that had always marked me as her twin. I yanked her inside, slamming the door behind us with a force that made her jump. The envelope slipped from her hands, spilling out a sea of photographs and documents onto the polished wood floor. Isabella, what happened? I whispered urgently, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. She held up the envelope again, her hands trembling violently. I could see it now, the photos of us, children, teenagers, in places we shouldn't have been together. There were old memories here, ones no one should remember, not like this. Not in this way. And there were documents, too. Documents that tied us together in ways I had never thought possible. They showed both our names, dates, proof of everything we had hidden from this world. Her voice cracked. They know about the switch. Isabella, they know. My blood ran cold. She took a deep, shaky breath. They sent this 3 days ago. Photos, documents, recordings. Everything. Her voice trembled on the last word, breaking with the weight of it all. They know everything. I grabbed her arms, pulling her deeper into the foyer, away from the windows, my mind already racing. Whoever was behind this had been planning for weeks. Someone knew. Someone had been watching us, had been watching me. I glanced at her quickly. Where's Lorenzo? Parking the car down the road. We didn't want to drive straight up to the gate, in case they were watching. My heart raced even faster. Lorenzo. The man who had been helping Isabella stay hidden for months. The man I had never truly met, but who I'd always known was out there, doing everything to keep her safe. And now, they were all here in my house exposed. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered, her voice full of guilt and fear. I was too scared to text or call in case they were monitoring us. So I came here. I thought if I could talk to you and Dante, maybe we could. You did the right thing. I cut her off, even though my throat felt like it was closing up. Show me everything now. She dropped the envelope onto the side table, letting the papers spill out onto the surface. The photographs scattered across the wood. Us as children, inseparable, unrecognizable in our innocence. Us as teenagers, at family events, smiling for the cameras. But then, the photographs that made my blood freeze. Isabella with Lorenzo in Europe, 2 months ago, at a time when she should have been in Napa, here, with me. There was even one where my driver's license was clearly visible. My name, Isabella, not Isabella. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was catastrophic. What do they want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though everything inside me screamed to run, to hide, to protect what was left of my life. Isabella didn't answer right away, her hands shaking too much to grab the last paper in the envelope. I pulled it out myself, scanning the note in seconds. You have something that belongs to the Calibri family under false pretenses. Return to Napa and await instructions, or this evidence goes to your father and Dante's counsel within 48 hours. Come alone. Tell no one. We'll be in touch. The deadline was tonight. I could feel the panic clawing at my insides. We couldn't afford to wait. I glanced up at Isabella, my voice barely a whisper. We need to find out who's doing this fast. I thought if I came back, if I could talk to you, maybe. Her words caught in her throat as the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. We both turned at the same time. Dante stood in the doorway of his study, Marco just behind him. They froze when they saw her. Two identical women, two faces that shouldn't exist in the same room, and the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I turned toward them, and Dante's gaze locked on mine. His eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite read. Shock, recognition, confusion. Then the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "Marco," he said, his voice tight with control. "Close the study door. Lock it. No one comes in or out." Marco didn't hesitate, and I could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. He'd been Dante's trusted conciliar for 15 years. I had just broken his world, and now he knew it. Dante's gaze never left mine as he crossed the foyer. He picked up one of the photographs, the one of me at the marriage bureau. He studied it for a long moment, then set it down with deliberate care. "All of us now," he said quietly. The four of us moved into the study, the tension in the air so thick I could hardly breathe. Dante gestured for Isabella and me to sit on the leather couch. He took his place behind the desk like he was preparing for an interrogation. "Start talking," he said. His voice was calm, but there was a fury simmering beneath the surface. And that was when I knew this was just the beginning. The real fight was coming. The room felt smaller with all of us in it. Tension buzzed in the air, heavy like a storm waiting to break. Dante stood behind his desk, Marco leaning against the door with his arms crossed, his expression as unreadable as ever. Isabella and I sat on the leather couch, our eyes locked for a brief moment before I turned my focus back to Dante. "Start talking, Isabella," Dante said again, his voice cool and controlled. I opened my mouth, but it was Isabella who spoke first. "This is my fault," she said, her voice shaking. "All of it." I turned to her quickly, ready to stop her, but she raised a hand to silence me. "Isabella did this for me, to save me." Her eyes welled up and she looked away, clearly struggling with the weight of what had just come out. "And now, I've dragged both of you into this mess." I felt the flood of guilt wash over me as Dante's eyes flicked between the two of us. He wasn't angry yet, but I could feel the storm building, a quiet rage he was holding back. His gaze hardened as he turned to me. "No," Dante said softly, his voice steady but firm. "Not you, Isabella." His eyes locked onto mine. "Start from the beginning." My chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he had spoken my name with such weight. The last time had been when we signed those papers, our lives changing forever. And now? Now I was sitting here, surrounded by the truth of everything I had done to protect Isabella. I took a breath. It was the night before the marriage license appointment, when I found out about Isabella's relationship with Lorenzo. "I couldn't let her go through with marrying you, Dante." I hesitated. The words felt wrong, but the truth was the truth. She was in love with him. Not you. Dante's expression didn't change. He hadn't flinched. "So you made the choice to take her place?" I nodded. "I did." I swallowed hard. "I didn't know if you would notice the switch. I didn't know if you would feel it, if you would realize that it wasn't her. But I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't step in, Isabella would have been destroyed, and the entire valley, the entire alliance would have gone back to war." There was a brief silence as Dante seemed to absorb that. His fingers steepled in front of his face, and I could tell he was calculating, weighing everything in his mind. "You knew," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "You knew within 30 seconds of touching my wrist. You saw the birthmark I don't have. You saw my name on the ID. And you chose to sign anyway." Dante leaned back in his chair, the muscles in his jaw tightening. He didn't say anything for a moment, but when he did, his voice was quiet but sharp. I chose to sign because exposing you would have meant your death and the collapse of the Alliance. He stopped, then added, his words almost bitter. I chose to protect the deception because it served my family's interests. I'm sorry, I whispered, the weight of the words settling in my chest. I'd lied to Dante. I'd lied to everyone. But it was a lie that had saved lives. And right now, it felt like the truth was tearing everything apart. Lied to, Marco finished flatly, his eyes narrowing at me from across the room. That's what you're calling it? A lie? The accusation stung, but it was the truth. I had lied. Not just to Dante, but to Marco too. I forced myself to meet Marco's gaze. I didn't want to, but I had to. He was Dante's conciliar, his right-hand man, and I had just proven to him that I wasn't trustworthy, that I hadn't been honest with him. Yes, I said simply, I lied to you, to everyone except Dante, and I'd do it again. I met Dante's eyes then, willing him to understand. Because the alternative was Isabella dying in a marriage that would have destroyed her and everything we had built. The alternative was war. Marco's jaw clenched, his fists at his sides. How noble, he muttered under his breath, his tone dripping with sarcasm. But before I could respond, Dante's voice cut through the tension. Enough, he said, his voice low but absolutely certain. This is not the time for anger. Marco looked like he was about to say something, but Dante's gaze silenced him immediately. Marco's eyes flicked to the door before he nodded once, accepting Dante's command. I turned back to Dante, who was now looking at me with a cold focus. His gaze softened slightly, and I could see the layers of strategy turning in his mind. I don't like this, Dante said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. But we're running out of time. He exhaled slowly and picked up the photograph again. So what now? We find out who's blackmailing us, I said, the words coming out more confidently than I felt. We neutralize them before they can use this against us. Before they can destroy everything. Dante nodded, but there was still a heaviness in his gaze. Do you trust Lorenzo? He asked, his tone a little more personal now. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said firmly. He's been protecting Isabella for months. He could have sold this information to anyone, but he didn't. And if someone found him, if they found us, then it's clear whoever we're dealing with has serious resources, serious access. Dante studied me for a moment before he nodded. All right, let's assume that whoever we're dealing with knows everything. That means they're watching, and they know exactly what they're doing. There was a soft knock at the door, and I jumped. Dante looked toward it and said one word, "Enter." One of Dante's men appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Boss," he said, his voice low. "There's a man at the gate. Says his name is Lorenzo, and he's expected." Isabella's eyes widened, and her face went pale. "Let him in," Dante said with finality. "But bring him directly to the study. No one else sees him." A moment later, Lorenzo walked in. He was tall, lean, and sharp-eyed, like someone who had learned to move through dangerous spaces without leaving a trace. "Mr. Calabresi," he said, offering his hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Dante took his hand, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We're going over everything the blackmailer sent." For the next 30 minutes we dissected every detail. Marco took notes, his anger channeled into a cold, focused energy. Lorenzo spoke about his time with Isabella in Europe, the measures he took to keep her safe, and what we had missed. It wasn't until Lorenzo flipped through the photographs of us in Europe, the ones taken at the Wine Expo in Milan, that the pieces finally started falling into place. "Look at these," he said, spreading the photos out on the table. "These aren't taken by amateurs. This is professional surveillance, probably multiple teams. And look at the dates." He pointed to the timestamps on the photos. "These are from 4 months ago, not 6 months ago, when Isabella left." Quote, "I felt a chill in my bones." Lorenzo's words rang true. They started watching after the wine expo in Milan, I said quietly, connecting the dots. Someone saw Isabella there. Someone who recognized her or recognized that she looked exactly like Dante's wife, who was supposed to be in California. And then they started investigating, Marco said grimly. They tracked her, dug into the timeline to figure out what the discrepancy meant. Dante's voice was ice, which means whoever we're dealing with is someone inside the wine trade, someone with access to our world. The realization hit me like a punch. Whoever was behind this wasn't just some outsider. They knew us. They knew everything. And they were playing us. The silence in the room thickened after Lorenzo's words. We all knew it now. Whoever we were dealing with had more than just leverage. They had access. They knew our world, our business, our family. And that made them dangerous. Dante's mind was already racing through possibilities. I could see the wheels turning behind his cold, calculating eyes. We need to act fast, he said, his voice steady but laced with an urgency that made the tension in the room tighten. Whoever this is, they've been waiting for the perfect moment, and now that they've got us on the edge, we're running out of time. I nodded. We can't let them destroy everything we've built. We need to find them before they strike. Lorenzo leaned forward, his eyes sharp. They've been patient. They waited 6 months for this. They know exactly how to use the twin deception against us. It's not just about exposing a secret, it's about tearing down everything we've worked for. I agree, Dante said, his gaze flicking between all of us. But what's their end game? Why wait for so long? Because of the Eastern Territory expansion, Marco said flatly, his eyes narrowing as he put the pieces together. This vote is the perfect moment for them. It's the most critical move we've made in years. If the alliance fractures right before the vote, they take advantage of the chaos and move in. The expansion vote is on Friday, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I had known about the negotiations, the talks to extend our territories into Nevada and Arizona, but hearing it now, in this context, felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Lorenzo's eyes widened as the weight of it sank in. They want to destroy the alliance just before you make the biggest move of your careers. If the vote fails, the entire foundation crumbles. Dante stood, moving toward the window that overlooked the vineyards. His silhouette was tense, his posture rigid with thought. This isn't just a power grab. This is a calculated attack. If they can break the alliance, they walk in and take over. They don't even have to fight for it. I could feel the strategy forming in Dante's mind, but there was one question that still loomed large in my own heart. Who would benefit from all this? Who would want to see the alliance fall apart? Dante turned back toward us, his eyes hard. Whoever has the most to gain from our downfall, whoever stands to lose the most from the expansion. His words hung in the air, but I knew we were getting closer. The threat was internal. Someone we knew. Before I could voice my thoughts, the soft knock at the door interrupted us. Dante's eyes flashed toward it. "Enter," he said. The door opened, and Marco stepped inside, his face tight with purpose. He moved quickly, his gaze flicking to each of us before focusing on Dante. "Boss," Marco began, "we've got a problem. One of our warehouses is burning. It's a professional job, and it's just the start." Quote. The blood drained from my face. "What do you mean?" "It's a message," Marco said, his voice low. "Whoever we're dealing with isn't waiting for the council meeting. They've already started making their move. They're attacking us where it hurts." Dante's expression hardened. "How bad is it?" Quote. "7 million in direct losses," Marco said. "Maybe double that in contract penalties for missed shipments. The fire's too big for us to contain quickly. And we're talking about a high-level professional team. They knew exactly where to hit for maximum damage." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just a warning. This was an escalation. Whoever was behind this had resources, connections, and the means to go after us in a way that could bring everything down in an instant. "Who's behind it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We don't know for sure yet," Marco said, "but the operation looks like it has Mel's fingerprints all over it." My blood ran cold at the mention of Silvio Mel's name. Mel wasn't just any rival. He was dangerous, a calculating power player who would stop at nothing to take over the West Coast territory. And if he was behind this attack, It meant we were on the verge of open war. "This is Mel," Dante confirmed, his voice icy. "He's playing us. He's trying to destabilize us before the vote, making his move before we can get our bearings. This fire is just the beginning." The room went deathly quiet. "So what now?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "How do we stop him?" "We make it clear that he's not going to get away with this," Dante said, his gaze sharpening. "We control the narrative. We expose him before he has a chance to use our weaknesses against us." Marco nodded. "I've already begun gathering information on his movements. We need to get ahead of this. The longer we wait, the more ground he gains." "Do you have any leads?" I asked, looking between Marco and Dante. Marco didn't hesitate. "I'm tracking down his associates. There are 3 people we need to focus on. Paolo Ferraro, who runs a shipping company, Lucia Bianchi, who owns a logistics firm, and Tommaso Costa." "Tommaso is on your council, Dante. He's the one we need to watch." "Tommaso?" Dante echoed, his voice low with suspicion. "He's been with us for years. He's not the type to betray the family." I shook my head. He could be the one feeding information to Mel. If he's involved, it explains a lot. He's had access to everything, our shipments, our plans. If he's the inside man, we'll have to move quickly, Dante said. The fire at the warehouse might be a diversion. We need to lock down all our assets and figure out who's compromised. Marco, start pulling up records on Ferraro, Bianchi, and Tommaso. We'll start there. Understood, Marco said, already pulling out his phone to make calls. Dante turned to me. You're going to help me with this. I need you to start keeping track of all the moves they're making. Look for patterns. You've been good at that. We need to know exactly who we're dealing with. Quote, I nodded, the pressure building inside me. The walls were closing in, and it felt like we were all standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. But one thing was clear. We had to take control of this situation. We couldn't afford to wait and let Mel set the terms. The phone in my pocket buzzed, cutting through the tension in the room. I pulled it out and saw that I had a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text. Well done bringing Isabella home. Now let's discuss terms alone. I showed Dante the screen and his face hardened immediately. They're going to want to meet, and we don't have time for that. Let's make sure they regret sending this, I said, my voice firm. Dante's gaze met mine, and for the first time since all of this started, I saw something else in his eyes, something fierce, determined. We'll deal with them, he said. Together. And in that moment, I knew we weren't just fighting for our lives anymore. We were fighting for everything. For the future of the valley, for the Alliance, for our families. And no matter who we were up against, we weren't going to let them win. My phone buzzed again before I could even put it down. Another message from the same unknown number. 2 hours, Rutherford Hill Overlook. Come alone, bring the envelope. No weapons, no backup. We will know. Dante read it over my shoulder, and something in him went still. Not calm, not patient, still, like a knife held in place right before it strikes. You're not going, he said. I swallowed, my mouth dry. They already threatened Isabella. They threatened my mom. If I don't show up, they hurt someone. Dante's jaw tightened. If you go alone, they hurt you. Marco stepped in like he'd been waiting for the moment. You will look alone, he said. That is not the same thing. He laid out the plan in quick, sharp pieces. A woman named Sophia Romano would drive into town like she always did, for the farmer's market. No one would suspect it. I would leave my phone behind at the estate so it looked like I never moved. I would take Sophia's old Honda and go to the Overlook. Marco would track the Honda through a private channel. Dante's men would be close enough to move if something went wrong, but far enough that anyone watching would see nothing. I didn't like any of it, but the truth was worse. The blackmailer had already proved they could reach across oceans. They had already proved they were patient. They weren't bluffing. Sophia Romano turned out to be the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She handed me the keys and a burner phone like she was lending me a sweater. Trunk has water, she said. First aid. Be smart. I drove out with the windows up, hands steady on the wheel, forcing my breathing to stay even. Vineyards rolled past like nothing had changed. Like the world wasn't about to break open. At the Rutherford Hill Overlook, I parked where they told me to. The air smelled like sun-warmed dirt and grapes. A couple stood near the railing taking pictures, a jogger stretched by the trailhead. It looked normal, which made my skin crawl. At exactly noon, a woman walked up and sat beside me on the bench like she belonged there. She wore expensive casual clothes and held a coffee cup like she was just another tourist. "Isabella Calabresi," she said without looking at me. Or should I say Isabella pretending to be Isabella Calabresi? My stomach turned, but I kept my voice steady. "Who are you?" She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were cold and flat, like she'd never cared about a person in her life. "I'm the one keeping your family alive. For now." I held up the manila envelope. "You want this?" Quote. She reached for it, and I pulled it back. "Not until you show me you have more." Her mouth curved into a thin smile. "Good. That means you're not as weak as they hoped." She lifted her phone and showed me a grainy video. Security footage from years ago. Me and Isabella as teenagers at a family event, both of us clearly visible. 2 girls. 2 faces. Proof that could destroy everything. "We have it all," she said. "Birth records. School records. People who remember. The kind of proof your counsels can't ignore." My throat tightened. "What do you want?" Quote. She leaned back like she was talking about the weather. "Dante withdraws from the Eastern Territory expansion vote. He announces the alliance is not ready. He steps aside, and someone more suitable leads the next phase." "And who would that be?" I asked. Her smile sharpened. "Someone who understands power." The answer was clear without her saying it. Her boss. The person behind this. The one trying to break the alliance and walk in like a savior. "You have 3 days," she said. "If Dante withdraws, the evidence stays buried. If he refuses, we send copies everywhere. Your father, Dante's counsel, rivals, partners, everyone. And then you get to watch your peace turn into war." She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked away like she'd just finished a pleasant chat. I watched her get into a silver Audi and vanish down the road. I sat there for 5 minutes after she left, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Then I drove back, eyes on my mirrors the whole way, heart pounding so hard it hurt. When I reached the estate, Dante was already waiting. The moment I stepped out of the car, he pulled me into his arms like he needed to prove I was real. His grip was too tight, but I didn't fight it. I let myself breathe him in, the clean bite of his cologne, the rough scrape of his jaw against my temple. The way his hands held me like losing me was not an option. "I'm fine," I whispered. He didn't let go. "You're never doing that again." Inside the study, I told everyone what the woman demanded. Marco's expression turned dark. Isabella's face went pale. Lorenzo stood close to her, one hand on her back, like he could hold her steady through force alone. "It's a takeover," Marco said. "They want Dante to look compromised. They want him to step back so their boss can step in." Dante stared out the window at the vineyards. "They think the secret is a weapon." I swallowed. "It is, if we let it be." Dante turned back, eyes hard with decision. "Then we take the weapon away from them." That was how the plan changed. Not to hide, not to beg, not to wait. We would tell the truth first. On our terms. We spent the next 2 days moving like we were holding a fragile glass in our hands. Dante and Marco spoke to council members who valued profit and stability more than pride, men with kids, men who had buried sons in the old war and didn't want another. I stayed visible in all the normal places, smiling when I had to, acting like nothing was wrong. At night, Dante and I went over every word, every reaction, every small shift in power. By Thursday night, we had enough votes to protect me. Not everyone would forgive me, but enough of them would choose peace over blood. Then, at 2 in the morning, alarms screamed through the estate. One of our warehouses was burning. We stood on a hillside watching flames eat through millions of dollars like it was paper. Dante's face was stone, but I could feel the rage in him, the kind that didn't shout, the kind that promised. Marco arrived with footage. Professional, fast, clean. "This is their answer," I said. Dante's voice was low. "They want us afraid." Marco's eyes flicked up from his tablet. "I found something else." A financial trail. A loan that traces back to shell companies tied to Silvio Mel. The name hit the room like a slap. A man with reach, patience, money. The kind of enemy who did not stop once he started. Then Marco found the next piece, and my blood went cold. "Franco," he said. "He took money 6 months ago, right after we stripped him of power." Dante's eyes narrowed. "He's feeding Mel information." Marco nodded. "And if we can flip him, we can feed Mel lies." I didn't like trusting Franco. Franco was poison with a smile. But poison could be used. So we met him the next morning in a private room of an upscale restaurant Dante's family owned. Franco looked older, harder, and his eyes sharpened when he saw me beside Dante. Dante didn't blink. "Sit." We laid the proof out like cards. The money, the messages, the records. Franco didn't deny it. He just leaned back and smiled like he was proud of his own betrayal. I leaned forward. "Do you know what Mel really plans to do?" That got his attention. I showed him the acquisitions, the hidden warehouses, the quiet purchases in Napa that were never meant to be quiet forever. I showed him the pattern, a net closing in. Dante's voice was ice. "He's not sharing power with you. He's using you." Franco's smile slipped, just a little. He stared at the papers like they were turning into a cage around him. Marco added the final blow. "He promised the same position to other exiled men. He will let you fight each other, then cut down whoever survives." Franco's face went white, then red, then cold. "What do you want?" he asked. "Everything," Dante said. "Names, timelines, proof. And you will contact Mel and tell him we are breaking apart exactly like he expects." Franco hesitated, then nodded. "Fine." 2 hours later, we had the missing pieces. Tommaso Costa on the council, Paolo Ferraro in shipping, Lucia Bianchi in logistics. A plan to drop the twin evidence right before the vote and let honor tear the alliance apart while Mel's men hit our infrastructure. We couldn't wait for tomorrow. We called an emergency council session that night. The chamber felt like a courtroom and a battlefield at the same time. Dante led with Mel, the threat, the timeline, the proof. Marco played recordings that made Tommaso's betrayal undeniable. The room erupted. Shouts, accusations, rage. Then Dante turned to me, and I stepped forward. "Mel needed more than a traitor," I said. "He needed a weapon that would make you fight each other instead of him." I took a breath, and Isabella stepped into the light beside me, 2 identical faces. The room went silent so fast it felt like the air stopped moving. I told them everything. The night before the courthouse. The choice I made. The risk I took. The truth Dante already knew. I didn't beg. I didn't soften it. I framed it for what it was. A brutal decision made to stop a brutal war. Some faces stayed hard. Some shifted. Some looked away like they hated themselves for understanding. Dante stood beside me like a wall. "The alliance stands," he said. "Or we return to blood." In the end, they chose survival. They stripped Tommaso of power and exiled him. They agreed to keep the marriage, keep the alliance, and move forward with the expansion. Not because they loved me, not because they forgave me, but because they understood the real enemy, and because they understood that if they killed me, Mel won. When we walked out of that chamber, my legs felt weak. I hadn't realized how much my body was holding until it finally released. Outside, Dante put his hand at the small of my back and pulled me close. "You did that," he murmured. "We did that," I corrected. Later that night, back on the terrace overlooking the valley, the wind soft against my skin, Dante took my hands. "This started with deception," he said, "but what we built is real. I want one thing now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught. "We're already married," he said. "But I want to ask you the right way. Not as Isabella. Not as a substitute. As you." His eyes held mine like he could see every fear I'd ever carried. "Isabella," he said, voice rough with emotion, "marry me again. Stand with me in front of everyone as yourself, and choose me the way I'm choosing you." Tears blurred my vision, but my voice was steady. "Yes," I said. "Yes, Dante. I choose you." He slid the ring onto my finger, And then he kissed me like the world had almost taken us and failed. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Peace.